This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. On the show today, you'll find out where book publishing is going and how to take advantage of it. How to identify and avoid publishing predators. What opportunities are emerging as the book trade evolves in new forms. How to avoid losing money and much, much more. Join us now as a variety of publishing pros will deliver insights and strategies to take the author to the next level of publishing. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by Author U and The Book Shepherd. And now, here's your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
There was so much information that we really felt that we needed to make it a two-parter. So just to do some recapping about what it was all about, and I'm going to encourage all of you listening in, please go back and listen to the preceding weeks. It's described as a part one, so this will be part two. But we went into the core of what was the structure of your speech. How do you put it together? What's the presentation all about? And getting into the key points, how do you support those points step by step, as well as do you do exercises, activities, examples when you brought in stats, as well as the reinforcement of it before you went on to the next one. We also looked at what happens if time is crunched. And what should you do when your 90-minute presentation has been zapped to 10 minutes or 15 minutes at the max? And we gave you some pointers on how to handle that. I introduced a couple of concepts, including that what was really critical to have in this is that you wanted to have what we call signature stories. These are your stories. And I really mentioned that it's really a challenge when I see people telling jokes. Most people don't tell jokes well. And if there was a gender issue, this is one of those. I think men do a better job at some of their points and jokes. We women seem to more excel at our stories, although men do extraordinarily fun stories. At the recent Author U extravaganza, which was the first of the month, and I would encourage all of you, please put on your calendars May 7th through 9th for next year. Plan on being in Denver, Colorado at the 6th annual Author U extravaganza. It is the premier place for authors who are seriously successful. Whether you have a book or you have one in process, we bring all the game players together at this time to make you and your book sing, soar, and rocket. And you'll be able to schmooze, network with people who are really doing it if you're just new to the process, or if your book is limping along, you want to be there. But with that said, I did the closing session on how to create and structure a speech. And it was really designed to go 50 minutes, but we were pushed and we went up to an hour and 50 minutes. You can get that on video. And you'll actually see me acting out some of these stories that I'm going to talk about today, how to create the signature story. Get the video. How you find that is go to Author U, and that's the letter U, authoru.org. Just click on store, the store tab, and right there are all the extravaganzas items. So that will make total sense to you, so you have the visual support, which I'm a huge believer in. All right, so how I left it last week, that it made sense. I actually talked to the producer post the show saying, you really ought to be doing another part to this. So I'm going to come back and talk about what's really critical is setting your stage. And that starts off with you need to have the right introduction. Secondly, we're going to come back to those signature stories and how to identify those. And then how there's really a choreographing that goes on to them. And then how do you look for gigs that would support you? And then lastly, how do you move from free to fee? And when should you be doing a free when you are totally a fee-based speaker, or think you should be, and when does it make sense to do some trade-offs and offsets or bartering and the like. So that's where I want to focus on. So I think what I'd like to do is let's head up. We're going to do kind of modules today, And we'll look at those elements of, for example, that introduction. What do you need in an introduction? And the reality is, here's one of the things I find so fascinating, is that sometimes introductions seem to be longer than the talk. And here, keep this in mind. Number one, an introduction is not your resume. It is not your CV. It's not where you went to school. It's not how many gazillion degrees you have, if you have those in your pedigree. It's to set it up. It's a staging setup that you go along. So here's some key things you want to remember about that. You write it out. And I have on my websites, I have, for the speaking side, I have an introduction that a meeting planner can go and get. I have tips. Now that you've hired me, this is how it's best to work with me. I actually have a room set up. If you have control of it. Sometimes you don't have control of rearranging a room or anything. But one of the things that's really smart for speaking is that you want to have your audience close. You don't want to have huge gaps. You don't want to have a bowling alley scenario where you go down the hall. All of that sucks your energy. So part of my introduction package would be a already written up introduction. Now, when I was out speaking on the platform, of which I did over 30 years internationally, that I spoke to a huge preponderance of healthcare related groups. So I had a special introduction for dental groups. I had a special introduction for healthcare groups. I had a special introduction for our nursing group. I had a special introduction for general business or general business groups. And I had that. Now I probably would just speak about publishing. So I have a special introduction just for publishing related in that. And all of them will have different nuances that will tie you into the audience. And because of the verbiage and the way you lay it out, your credentials will come out in that area. And usually specifically they come out, you are the author of blah, 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 which ties into that expertise on that. It also, there's a little inside of this is that in an interjection is that it lays out for the audience that number one, you're the author of XYZ book. And if you have the host say in the introduction, you want to say that for me, it would be Judith will be available after her presentation at her book table. All right. Now, I normally did, when I spoke for any group, I always donated 10% of whatever was sold back to the group, whether it was for a scholarship or a foundation or fill in the blank. So I did that. But because the person who's introducing me has set the stage that I will be here to talk with them, to network with them, to schmooze with them, to sign my books, I'll be back at my book table. It will increase your book sales. So have it on your website, number one. Number two, email it, even though it's on the website, email it ahead before you go. And number three, make sure you carry one with you. And have it in at least 14-point font so they can see it without their glasses. Good idea. And that even though you've sent it ahead, trust me, they disappear. So carry them with you. Typically what you'll see a lot of time, people will fall back to the description that's in a program in that light. And so you don't want that because that kind of stuff is usually kind of boring. Now, put in pauses if you have punch and laugh lines. And do that, go ahead by putting a ... If your name is unusual, if it's not Smith or Johnson, even my name, Briles, I think is fairly simple. It's only 6 letters, but they often say Briles. So sometimes I will remind them at the top where I have my name, Judith Briles, I would put rhymes with smiles. And then they don't forget that. Let the introducer tell them that you have books available for sale after your presentation, so then you're not pitching. And then don't take, and this is critical, don't take your check as in swoop in, do your presentation, even if you're a rock star. Don't swoop in and then split after the program. Listen, people want to talk to you. And when you hang around, not only do you sell more books, but you know what? You might get another speaking gig. So that's important. So let me give you a quick sample now as I go through this. And this is very short. And I don't want an introduction to exceed the length of the page of what you're going through. So we don't want it to exceed the length. So now here's what we're going to look at. And I'm going to give you a really quickie one. All right, our speaker today is Dr. Judith Briles, the author of Author You, Creating and Building Your Book, your author and book platforms, or it could be blah, 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 whatever here. Judith has spoken in front of such diverse groups as the operating room nurses, the 8th grade class of Portola Valley Elementary School, and the Tank Division of the U.S. Army. She's been featured on every major TV show from Oprah to CNN to Waterloo's public TV station and the Wall Street Journal, People magazine, and the National Enquirer. Today, she will be speaking on creating your author and book platforms. Please join me in welcoming Judith Briles. Now, let me come back to the second paragraph. The first paragraph says who I am. Let's do the whole thing. The first paragraph says who I am, and I'm the author of whatever book I'm going to be talking on. And then the second paragraph is I am setting the stage that I've got the capability of addressing a broad range of individuals, the operating room nurses, the 8th grade class of Portola Valley Elementary School. That means I can handle kids and maybe rowdy groups, and the Tank Division of the U.S. Army. So I went from basically all women to kids to almost all men. So I'm letting them know that there's a broad spectrum of my capabilities. I've been featured on from Oprah to CNN to public TV to the Wall Street Journal to People magazine to the National Enquirer. So I've got from the serious business of the Wall Street Journal to the ridiculous of the National Enquirer. I got from Oprah, national attention, to CNN. We'll be right back.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these on the Rockstar Radio Network.
Is there a book in you or another? Author You will show you how to create, develop, and publish your book without being hoodwinked. If you already have a book out, you'll find a supportive and brainstorming community that's connected and creative no matter where you live. Author U brings in national experts for its book camps and annual author extravaganza held each May. It has regular meetings and delivers webinars for its members on timely topics. Through Author U's extensive network, members enjoy exclusive benefits, including significant discounts for a variety of services necessary to publishing. The Resource, its online book publishing news magazine, is content-heavy and it's free. If you want to create a book that has pizzazz, punch, and panache, Author U is for you. If you're a hobbyist or a casual author, it's not. Join Author U today through its website at authoru.org. Follow Author U on Twitter at Author U and on Facebook at Author U, where timely author and publishing tips and articles are posted daily. Author U, where the author goes to become seriously successful.
Picture tells a story. And it's a truism that people do judge a book by its cover. Nick Sellinger and NZ Graphics have been in the business of producing superior graphic cover design and interior layout for self-published authors, independent and traditional publishers for years. He has developed a reputation for excellent work, fast turnarounds, and best of all, affordable pricing. NZ Graphics also produces ebooks and book marketing materials such as posters, sell sheets, postcards, bookmarks, business cards, logos, and more. Books designed for his clients have won multiple book awards, including Best Book Award by U.S. Book News, multiple Evie Awards from the Colorado Independent Publishers Association, Indie Book Awards, the San Francisco Book Festival Award, and Freedom Medal Award from Valley Forge. Visit www.nzgraphics.com or call 303-985-4174 for more details about making your book the success it should be. Mention that you are an FOJ, friend of Judith's, and that you heard about NZ Graphics on your guide to book publishing.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Alrighty, so I have to say a big shout out, kudos to several of from the Author U community, because the International Book Awards were announced, and that a dozen of the Author U members, the actual members, picked up awards. Either they were the actual winner or the finalist, which is very exciting. So shout outs to Jerry Altman for his book. To Mar Pearl for her fiction books, to Courtney Miller for his debut fiction book, for Gail Mancini for her women's lit book that she picked up, to Debbie Wild for her book for nonprofits, to let's see who else was out there. A lot of people. I picked up a book for my brand new book, Snappy, Sassy, Salty. But the reality is that I know Jerry Altman listens to the show regularly, and he actually, as he put together his very first book for children, dealing with not sticking stuff up their nose, in their eyes, in their ears, the wrong thing in the mouth, and all those other items that come along. That one of the things is that he listened to the many shows as he structured his book and put it together, and was successful that way. So that's very exciting that that they were succeeded, and they've gotten recognition for their books, because it does make a huge difference in everything that they're doing. So we're excited there for them. Anyway, let's get back to talking about the introductions and the stories and the likes. So the introduction is critical, really critical for your book as you go along. So I wanted to just get that covered very quickly as we started. So let's talk about this thing called signature stories. They are so critical and the core of creating a speech. I always open my talks with a story. Now, what you want to do is use your own stories. You don't need to use my stories. And here's what a lot of newbie people do, is they're fearful. They're not sure. They hear a speaker and think that speaker's the cat's meow. And what they do is they start borrowing. You don't have to do that. All of us have events, activities, ahas, failures, successes that come along and become the fabric of who and what we are. And those little goodies can come along and really do a major part of humanizing you, of sometimes humbling you. But the real purpose is they connect you with your audience. When you open a presentation, that the last thing I want to hear one of you do after the introduction is, do not get up and say, "It's so great to be here in Duluth," or wherever you are. It's just so wonderful to be in front of blah, 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 blah. And thank you so much for having it. You thank them at the very end. You want to just get into it. The exception would be politicians who have to thank everybody and their uncle for being there that day. That's their formula. But the rest of us can get into it, which means you and how you bring it about. You can start with a story. You can start with an amazing statistic, including one you might make up. That's part of making up a story. You could start with a current event, that something that becomes the grabber. But what I want to do is just look at what we call in the speaking business a signature story and what makes a signature story. So those are those events, those activities, those aha, failures, successes, etc., that you personally have experienced. Now, when I'm crafting a presentation, when I go through, even though I've done a presentation a gazillion times, I will, I always go through and do a multi-hour review. And by the way, for every time I do a talk, I put in at least 8 hours for every hour of presentation that I go into. And that I go in and say, okay, so what's this talk about? If it was a talk, for example, around the book I have called The Confidence Factor, I would, and if my audience was predominantly female, I would often talk about a situation that happened to me many years ago, when I stepped out of the car that I was being driven to. It stopped in front of where I was going to be going into the presentation site. And the driver scooted around and opened the door, and as I gathered my stuff on the back seat, and offered me his hand, very nice, as I stepped out of the car. Well, when I stepped out of the car, the end part comes up with my underwear fell off. Now, I didn't tell anyone about that for years and years and years and years, that I had lost my underwear going to a gig. But I started incorporating it into my presentations because, as you know, when you have those faux pas that we often can look back at them later on and get a chuckle out of them, it wasn't funny when it happened. But when I tell the story after I have choreographed the story, I literally it is funny. I made it funny. So I go through that. Now, the purpose of it is I play with it a little bit, is that, and I have sound effects in it, is that it is designed to humble me. I'm talking about confidence, regaining your confidence when you lose it. And let me tell you, and I go through in that presentation the definition between confidence and self-esteem, at least my definition. So one of the things is when I'm defining those two, after I have opened this presentation on the confidence factor, is that I will lead into the story, and then I will open up with what my definition of confidence is, and separate it from self-esteem. And I will then weave it, link it back to my story. And I will say, when I was in Seattle, I didn't lose my confidence, at least not initially. What I did is I lost my self-esteem. It was my confidence, the power of the confidence factor, that allowed me to now tell you about what happened to me those many years ago. So there are ways to tie those things in. So I have other talks. For example, if I was doing a presentation about money, and money as I go through that, then I would be talking about what I call, just my reminder on my notes would be the stuffed green chair. And it's a true story, actually not changed one bit, no enhancements. Sometimes, we do enhance these. That about a woman, a client of mine, when I was in financial planning many, 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 many years ago, that when I went to leave her, my hand is on the knob, and I will demonstrate this to the audience. I'm reaching for the knob, and she said, "What about my stash?" And I said, stash? What stash? I thought we had all your information. She says, well, no, there's my stash. It's over there. Well, she painted to over there. Over there was wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling, dark drapes. You've been in older homes, very small windows, but they have wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling, dark drapes. And when I'm describing this, I am spreading my hands out, going wall to wall, and then I'm going vertically, floor to ceiling, dark drapes. And over there was this huge, and now I am expanding my arms, huge, overstuffed green chair. Over there was $30,000 in cash. Note how I repeated over there, over there, over there. There is power in repetition. Over there, $30,000 in cash. You see, my client had gone through the Depression. She couldn't trust the banks fully. It took me 3 years to move $25,000 of that money into safe vehicles. They were, financial institutions related, money market funds at that time. They were paying huge percentages. And we kept $5,000 in the chairs and drapes. She needed to have stash. I got it. I understood it. And she recognized fully that the house could be burned down, she could be burgled, and she could lose it. She recognized the risk, but she needed it. I got it. So that opens up the whole ability that I can talk about risk and understanding it, and then places to put your money that you need to access. So you develop that. Now, I had other stories where I opened with, and we'll come back, and I'm going to give you each one where they came from. I'm not going to go in detail, but I just did with the chair, where the underwear story took me 4 minutes and 23 seconds to go through. The overstuffed chair is like a 90-second story. Each one is designed to do different things. They could be supporting a point, or they will be an opening or even a closing. We're going to be right back. Lots more with Author You. I'm Judith Briles.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these on the Rockstar Radio Network.
Since 1987, Color House Graphics has set the standard for quality book production. Whether you decide to print a small quantity of books or need a large print run, depend on Color House to help you. You'll receive professional help and advice the moment you reach one of our representatives. If you mention hearing about us on your guide to book publishing with Judith Briles, we will provide you a discount on the first order you place. To speak with a project manager, call us toll-free at 800-454-1916 or visit us at www.colorhousegraphics.com.
When Ned Thompson and Harry Shore started Thompson Shore in 1972, they believed employees with great character would make up the best company. They were right. They hired people who were not only experts in bookmaking, but who were obsessed with quality and delivering exceptional customer service. Almost 40 years later, Thompson Shore remains a 100% employee-owned company. Ned and Harry knew that successful customer projects are a direct result of empowered employees. We specialize in all books for large and small publishers. Creating beautiful and well-made books, we're dedicated to pleasing our customers by making the experience a good one from start to finish. The personal touch we have with our customers allows us to be innovative in solving their most difficult challenges. Our platform also ensures that we can remain flexible to meet our customers' unique needs and expectations. Our marketing kit can create buzz for your title title, Enhancing the Promotion of Your Book During Infancy. When you need to test the market to gauge your future sales, we can provide digitally printed books that will transition seamlessly into a larger offset run. From ebook to hard copy to delivery, our skillful customer service teams are at the ready to answer your most pressing question. At Thompson Shore, we know that making the highest quality books requires more than just best technologies. It requires superior customer service, professionalism to the trade, and commitment to environmental and social values. With these standards of excellence in place, you can be sure that we will always help you put your best book forward.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Coming up, you'll hear more about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Alrighty, so we're back, and we always have a break with one of our sponsors, and I'm going to let the Book Shepherd, which is yours truly, let you know about a couple of things I have coming up, because I would love to see and meet some of you here. There's two ways to do that. One, I'm doing Judith Briles Unplugged, and that's what it's called, August 1st and 2nd, and it's two very intense, fun days just with me. So a lot of the things that I've been talking with you for the last 2 years about, I do. And we have hot seats. So you get involved. We keep it very small, around 30 people. Come around from around the country. We meet in Denver. And it's an amazing event that you have. So I would encourage you to participate. There right now, you can get $100 off just by going to the website, thebookshepherd.com. Clicked on events, and then you have the Judith Briles Unplugged. And Unplugged is what you put in as the code. Secondly, if you would like to have remote coaching done, I have a 3-month special series starting on June 2nd, and it's called The Author's Arc. We do live webinars. We keep it live. I keep it very small with this group, so we are open mic the whole time. We have group coaching, and the first one on June 2nd will be total let's get together, meet, and group coaching for anything you need. My philosophy always is the answer. You get the answer now. And then secondly, you have one-on-one laser coaching with me besides the webinars and group coaching. If you're interested in that, go again to thebookshepherd.com and click on events, and both items, the Author's Arc as well as Judith Briles Unplugged, is there. All right, so we are talking signature stories. And I was giving you a fuller example of the shorter one that I do, which I identified as the stuffed green chair. I've lost my underwear one time when I am talking about conflict in the workplace, conflict in healthcare, which my expertise was in. I often would start a story with how I ran into the rear end or the butt of an elephant in a major hotel casino in Las Vegas. And that happened when my kids were very young. And I tie it all together with and bring it back to loop it in for management, if I'm talking to management and their handling of employees, when I'm talking with coworkers, how they have to sometimes deal with coworkers. But I link it all into when you have to go through sticky situations that are uncomfortable, it's like running into the rear end of an elephant. When I would do money talks, because several of my books have been about finances years and years ago, I tell a story about when my son was 15 years old and I'm going up in his ski chair, and he asked me, "Are we rich?" And it turned out one of his best friends was a good friend of mine, and she talked about, well, Judith makes X amount of money or a lot of money or something like that. And so he wants to know, well, I grew up in a family where money was taboo. You didn't talk about money. And I decided that I had to break a legacy. So I went through the whole cycle of how I did that extraordinarily visual exercise. And it's another good 4-minute talk of that. When I talk about, I could talk about stress, or I talk about that, how I was put in and conflict. that sometimes what it can do to you. And I tell about a situation I personally went through where I had a partner of mine embezzle a significant amount of money from a loan I had personally guaranteed, and how I internalized it and I made myself sick. I used to imagine her blowing up in her car, and all the ramifications from that. Another situation when I went through a divorce many, many, many years ago, back in 1970, and got fired from my job for going through a divorce. And the outcome of what happened and what it allowed me to was to propel myself and move on, but how clients gathered around me and literally seeded my next life in a very amazing way that they did it. And then I talk about a situation coming back to the confidence factor, another signature story that we just call the Lid Lady, and how I had been referred. And what's fun about the Lid Lady story is that, and it's another long one, 4-minute story, and it ties in that I can use it for a point that I talk about in publishing. I can use it for a point I talk about confidence, about expecting the unexpected. I can use it a point that you take credit for the great things that you do, and which comes from confidence. It also can come from, finishing your book. And I could tie it into that. And the reality is there are people out there who are naysayers that no matter what, they're going to pull you down. And this particular story starts off with a phone call. And I had just come back from being on the road for a couple of weeks, and I had wonderful, wonderful audiences. I was, higher than a kite, and I was feeling great, great, great. And all of a sudden that I took a phone call coming in and greeted her. Well, it was someone that I had been referred to for speaking, and that I had pre-sent books and videos and our massive media kits we used to send back at that time. And I took the call, and she proceeded to tell me very quickly, I don't like you. I don't like the way you look, the way you talk, the way you walk. She said you have no sense of humor, that you were disorganized. And then she proceeded to tell me I need to go back to school and learn how to write. Well, imagine how you would feel if you had someone who you had never met but had been referred to proceed to say that to you. I felt pretty rotten. And, where I went from being higher than a kite when I came in, because I had a great 2 weeks on the road, sold a lot of books, met a lot of new friends, to having someone say, you suck. So I'm now on the floor. Well, my daughter, who used to work for me, turned to me and said, who was that? And I never tell my audience the name of the company, but here's what I do say. I said, I'll never tell you the name of who I was talking to, but you know what? If I went home with you and maybe scouted around your kitchen, I might find some products that this company makes, because if the lids probably are in one section and the plastic parts are in another section, and if you bring the lid and the part together, that, they burp. And of course, people are starting to say, oh, it's Tupperware. She's talking about Tupperware. But I never say Tupperware. And so I told her about the Lid Lady. And my daughter went over to one of our files. And I'm going to encourage all of you to have one of these files. And listen, all of you should have one of these files. And we call it the Nice Letter File. And there's people who have sent you notes and cards or emails today. And Cheryl pulled it out. And she said, Mom, here's a letter from Tom Peters. Here's a letter from Rosalind Carter. Here's a letter from Barbara Bush. Here's a letter from Diane Sawyer. Here's a letter from Jane Pauley. Mom, this woman doesn't count. And she was right. She didn't count. But you see, when people say stinging things to you, do you remember your accolades, your bravos, or do you remember the sting? The reality is, we remember the latter. Later that night, several of my friends were over for dinner, and I told them about my Lid Lady experience. And one of my friends got up from the table, and she went into the kitchen, and she heard some rustling around, and out she came with a big green trash bag. And Elaine said, where are they? And I said, what? And she said, the lids and their parts. And we had an exorcism. All of them left the building, and my friends know you don't bring them over. We use Ziploc and we use plastic and we use Rubbermaid, but we don't use the lid company. Ironically, I told that story and I was speaking in Boca Raton, Florida, and a woman came up to me and she said, "You were talking about," and she gave this woman's name, and I said, "How did you know?" And she said, "I quit because of her." So you never know who you're going to connect with and reach out. But if you can pull some of this from your own examples and then you tie them in to your stories and you use them for openings to closings to reinforcing key points. And what people get from you in a signature story is that you are real. You have experience. You've brought it together. It's huge in your success quotient. It's huge in your success quotient. Trust me. So dig into your past. Go back from when you were a little kid. How about what happened last week at the grocery store? Maybe something you really observed. Is there something that you then can take and milk it? Now, the lid lady story, I never had to change one thing. I went chronologically. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and voila. And then I pieced it together, and people get it. In the underwear story, that really did happen. I lost them. I, dropped on the floor. And one of the things that I had to share with you, I didn't go back to the Seattle area for 5 years. If anyone called me and said, "We wanted you to speak," I didn't go back because I was sure that everyone knew I lost my underwear in Seattle. And then I started using it as an opening part of my presentation. And sure enough, a woman comes up to me at my book table afterwards, and she said, literally, "You were in front of the Bon Marché department store in Seattle, weren't you?" And I said, "I was." And she said, "I saw you." So you never know. You never know. Running into the elephant, true story. I tell exactly how it happened. It happened. And the green chair, true story. So see, you can bring all these into play when you have them, and they all are there and they are right on top of what it is. Signature stories, create them, develop them. They're critical for your success. People will remember them. People will say, "I hope you tell that story again." And that's what a good story will do. When we come back, we're going to talk about finding gigs. We're going to talk about moving from free to fee. This is Judith Briles. You're listening to Author You, your guide to the publishing.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these on the Rockstar Radio Network.
The book shepherding concept is simple. The publishing world is changing, and so must you. You need an experienced shepherd and a guide to partner with you as you create, strategize, develop, publish, and achieve your publishing goals. You can't do it alone without paying the price. You can spend your money creating a book that turns out to be so-so, or you can create a book that looks and feels classy, builds your brand, and is a financial success, a bestseller. It's your choice. You choose. You need the book shepherd. Publishing is riddled with obstacles, sometimes nightmares for the author. You don't need problems. You want solutions. Dr. Judith Briles will shepherd you through the maze and the chaos. At times, she's had to step in and rescue a book that has been sabotaged by a publisher or by a publishing service provider or sometimes even the author themselves. Judith Briles is the book shepherd if you want to create a book with no regrets. Give her a call today, 303-885-2207. That's 303-885-2207, or email her at judith@briles.com. By the way, Briles is spelled B-R-I-L-E-S. Follow Judith on Twitter at MyBookShepherd and on Facebook at The Book Shepherd.
At Total Printing Systems, customer service is our priority. We are located in Southern Illinois. Our employees have an average of 18 years experience and know that customer relationships are important to our continued success. We have been a short-run book printer for nearly 40 years and always stay at the forefront of technology. Our niche is from 1 to 5,000 copies. Today, we offer digital, black and white, and 4-color high-speed inkjet printing, a cost-effective way to introduce color into your short-run titles. We, of course, offer traditional offset printing as well. Bindery is done in-house, from adhesive case binding to PUR perfect binding to mechanical binding of all types, including side sewing. We provide warehousing, kitting, distribution, inventory management, a new print-on-demand facility, streaming browser-based ebooks, and bookstore. Call us at 1-800-465-5200 for a quote on your next book project. You can also visit our website at www.tps1.com.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
All right, so we've talked about introductions. It's critical to have one. Do not make them boring. Have a little fun with it. We've talked about creating those signature stories, those life experiences, or those ahas, or those of you who can see things with a twist, tweaking them, really have a gift. And take that and run with it. So let's talk about getting gigs. How do you get gigs? Well, there's a variety of ways to go about doing that. A lot of people entering speaking to talk about their books would say, well, maybe if I can get with a speaking bureau, sounds great. But here's the reality: unless you're a celebrity or you're really in the news, those speaking bureaus don't care so much about you. You're going to have to earn your stripes, so to speak. And once you earn your stripes and people start really calling you, then they seem to be interested. But then you have to decide, do I need them? Do I need them? So let's start with, we're going to do this on our own. And if associations have meetings, national and state associations have meetings all year round. National are going to be more national. That they'll have maybe a national association may have multiple meetings that provide services or activities for various segments within their association. Sometimes they just have one huge meeting that they blow out once a year. For example, author.org, we have multiple meetings. We have monthly meetings. We have 2 annual all-day, what we call book camps. And then we have a 3-day event that it's always the first full weekend in May. So next year is May 7th through 9th. In that you could look at associations that are specific toward maybe your expertise or your industry. Or you can find any association that might be doing a program that might be open to whatever your expertise topic is about. And even for fiction authors, there's a possibility to speak to these groups, and you want to be on alert for that. And I can tell you, I did a huge amount of business before I started really exclusively speaking for healthcare. In the partner, used to be called spousal, but now usually it's called partner program of that. And there are ways to go about in doing that. And the idealing is if you're healthcare, a lot of it's clinical. I was what you call soft skill speaker because I dealt with behavioral related issues, conflict resolution, communications, and the like. So I was more of a soft skill, but I would always argue that my skills are as critical as the clinical, because if you don't have great communication skills, if you've got conflict zoring around, I don't care how competent you are, you think you are, how much you know technically, you have a failure factor because of the lack of in the other two. So I was always able to get in as often a keynote speaker. Or certainly a major workshop. Both were paid gigs, and then we always sold books as well. You can tap into something called the National Trade and Professional Associations of the United States, and each year they come out with a new one. Just look that up, National Trade and Professional Association of the United States, and put the year out, and you can find groups by the individual association name as well as within industry specific. For example, you could go to you could do National Association of Professional Women, but you could also find them under women, all right, if you were looking that way. Now, here's what that little gem tells you. It tells you what their annual budgets are. Like, we never contacted anyone if their annual meeting budget was $10,000 because it's very difficult to run a meeting for under $10,000, and you're sure not paying for speakers at that time. So you have to make a decision. Do you speak for free? Sometimes I did. And I had a criteria that I used. That number one, I would consider speaking for free if I felt passionate about the group, or I felt that there was, if I spoke for free, that there was someone in the audience, there would be some ones preferably, that could hire me at my regular fee. And that's really critical, that otherwise that some people just say, we'll just start speaking for Rotary and Kiwanis and that's fine to get your feet wet. But number one, you'll be lucky if you can sell a couple of books. And number two, that the probability of being hired to speak at your full fee is minimal, although sometimes you just never know. Someone in there might be on the program for the national meeting, or is pals with the person who's the chair that thinks you're a rock star and can refer you. You never know. You just have to weigh that out. But I would sure keep it in balance and check. Now, if you're just beginning to speak in this arena, then this is a great way to test your material as well as get organized with what you're doing. But I had to feel that way, passionate, or I felt someone was there that did it. Now, I also always, even if it was a free presentation, I always had a contract. And I know at the Judith Briles Unplugged, I give everyone all my stuff. You get all my stuff, including the contracts. Because my attitude is, I paid $1,000 to put the silly thing together with lawyers. I'll share it with you. But there's a couple things that I always made sure that I included. If I did a speech for free or at a reduced rate, sometimes you'll get someone, let's say you got your fee up to $5,000. And someone says, we can't pay more than $1,000. Here is what I would say to them. And now listen to this. I would say, so you'd like me to speak for your group. You can't pay my regular fee. You can pay $1,000. So you want me to donate $4,000 back to your group. What will I get in return? And then I just be silent. Now, they're kind of stumped when they hear this kind of thing because they don't think about you making a donation, but you are. Remember what I said earlier. For every hour I'm presenting, I have 8 hours of prep that I go into it. And if I'm traveling out of state, I have a day of travel, I have a day I'm at the event, and I have another day coming back. I'm committing basically 4 days to every presentation. What will I get in return if I donate back X amount of dollars? Let them think and come up, and you'd be surprised what they can come up with when they start thinking that way, because they don't think along those lines. Trust me on that. If you're in someone whose presentation will tie into healthcare in any way, and almost any nonfiction topic can work their way into healthcare in a variety of ways, because they're looking for cutting edge things, whether it's technology, whether it's social entities that are going on, whether it's you've got solutions, certainly with healthcare, nutrition, and so like that would fit in, but also other groups will be looking for it, breakout. And specifically for hospitals, a lot of hospitals do fall or spring community outreach, and they primarily are reaching out to women to do that, and they pay speakers, they bring them in. Will your topic resonate with a female type of audience? And you could tap into that. Where is a great resource to go here? There's something called the Hospital Blue Book, which was my Bible for years. A company called Billion, Billian, B with a B, Billian, and you go to .com, and they create the Hospital Blue Book. And I used to update mine every 4 years or so, buy a new one. And literally, you have every state hospital healthcare association. You have, and within the net, their state association, plus then you had within state by state by state, you would have all the hospitals. And here's what I would do. If I booked a gig in Atlanta, Georgia, I would reach out to every hospital in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida, and say, I'm going to be in your part of the country. I would make postcards up, and I would have postcards made, and they were all pre-written, and I'd have a little space I could write in. I'm going to be in your part of the country October 13th. If you book an event within 2 days before or after, I can reduce the fee and reduce the airfare, because then I would share the cost. You'd be surprised how much I doubled up with my booking doing those kind of things in reaching out. So there's a couple of ideas for you to go to the area. Now, from going from fee to free, which you're free to fee, that you just have to make that decision. I would start with $500 and then just start pushing it up and see where your resistance is. The other thing I would do, I'd always ask, who did you have last year speak at your conference? Look up their name. If they've got a full-blown website, if they look like this is what they do, speak, you know that they are a paid speaker. Go ahead and start moving it up and match it. If you're going to the corporate marketplace, they're not usually going to look at someone for under $3,500. Keep that in mind as you process through that. So there's just a few ideas. Literally, we've got 1 minute for our wrap up here. But speaking is a way to move books. It's a way to move a lot of books. And I've mentioned this before, my record was within 5 hours, I sold $16,000 worth of books. That was 566 books, one at a time, after I did a presentation to roughly 700 in the audience. And I would say a third to 40% bought books. You can make a living with your mouth. You can make a living with your words, but it takes work. You've got to have the Goit factor in play, get off your tush, and really focus on where you want to go. I'm Judith Briles. You've been listening to Author You, your guide to book publishing. We'll be back with you next week, and we're going to be talking about virtual assistants and all kinds of things to make it work and tie this all together even more. Have a great evening.
Thank you for being a part of Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles.